Thank you very much, Dr. Phan Thế Hưng, for the remarkable opening speech. Next, we are honored to introduce our presidential keynote speaker, Professor Andrew Lian. He is currently Professor of Foreign Language Studies of Suvarnabhumi University of Technology in Thailand, Professor of Ho Chi Minh City Open University in Vietnam, Professor Emeritus of University of Canberra in Australia, the President of Asian Co, the Asian Association of Computer Assisted Language Learning. He is also President of the Icte, a research and professional association focusing on the uses of technology to enhance second foreign language learning in Asian contexts. Previous to this appointment, he was professor and chair of the Department of Foreign Languages and Literatures at Western Illinois University in the United States. Prior to that, he had been professor of humanities and director of the Center for the Study of Languages at Rice University, Houston, Texas, USA, and professor and head of the School of Languages and International Education at the University of Canberra in Australia. He has held further professional appointments and had been head of a department in 2 other universities in Australia, including James Cook University and Bond University. Without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Andrew Lian to give the presidential keynote address about not font or fonts, but font, focus on the physical, an additional paradigm in language learning. Please welcome Professor Andrew Lian.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great honor to be here. It's a great honor to be president of the organization. I'm very grateful for the introduction. I really would like to mention the Dean of the Faculty of Foreign Languages, Dr. Phan Thế Hung, who is also chair of this conference, and to thank him and Van Lang University, and also Associate Professor Dr. Pham Vu Phi Ho for the opportunity of creating a new organization in the Vietnamese context, which is an amazing place. Vietnam is an amazing place for the study of English. Both in Asia Call and in this conference, we have had very large numbers of people offering papers, and that means that the level of intellectual work and the level of research in the country is very high. That's congratulations to everybody. Welcome to all the people who are participating today. This is a conference for you. It is a conference where we hope that together we can construct a future for the area of language education in Vietnam and around the world. And I am honored, as I said, to present to you a humble paper on a funny title. So let me begin. I will share my screen. Hope it works. There's a lot of people here. If you hear my dog from time to time, she gets very excited as she's chasing cats. So can you see my screen? Say yes, someone.
Yes, we saw that. Please go ahead.
And you can hear me, I hope. Of course you can hear me.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you. This is a paper about innovation. The conference is about innovation. I hope that when we leave the conference, we will go home energized, but continue with the energy. So, not font or fonts, but font. Focus on the physical. I hope that you all understand the joke built into the title of this presentation. If you don't, go back and look up Michael Long in your SLA lectures or wherever. A font is a way of dealing with grammar, which is based on the area of task-based learning to some extent. Fonfs is the old-fashioned grammatical drills that we used to have. But fonf, which is pronounced the same way as the other two, is actually, my fonf, is actually focusing on the physical. Well, why talk about the physical? Well, here we go. Well, when we engage with learners, we tend to treat them as though they consist of pure mind. You know, we have minds walking around, they talk to each other, we talk to your mind, and so on. But actually, we're not talking directly to anybody's mind. We are actually talk to your minds, perhaps, but in fact, that connection is never direct. And I think this is something that we quite often forget. We are always talking to people through their bodies. So remember that, because it's actually quite important. There's just no other way of doing it. Well, you can say, well, how about spirituality? How about a transmission of thoughts and so on? Well, yes, it's true for some people, but it's not true for when you go to the gas station and want to fill up your car. Okay. Yet, in a sense, we assume that so long as the signals sent to the learners are clear, they are receiving the signals in an unproblematic fashion for their mind to process. In other words, we as teachers, when I say we, I mean we as teachers, assume that as long as the signals are clear, the signals are received. We tend to worry about people's bodies only if they have a problem. If they're deaf, or if they're blind, or if they have some other disability. But actually, inevitably, we are, I repeat, physical and biological beings. And there are physical and biological processes that we simply cannot avoid. They apply to all living humans, and probably other species too. Well, certainly other mammals. We talk, our brain does something, it produces chemicals, the chemicals connect cells to one another, and so on. So this is called being embodied. And it's a fundamental issue in language education, in fact, every kind of education, because there is, to some extent, a separation between mind and body. And of course, we enter now a realm of philosophy, and in philosophy, the issue of mind and body is a very complex one. But for the purpose of this conversation and for the purpose of normal everyday life, we have a distinction between the two. Now, we've always known that we are embodied, but in the mainstream of teaching, we have tended to deal with this fact mainly by ignoring it. We just don't do anything about it. For instance, we do not have widespread biologically based teaching and learning systems. I said widespread. I'm not saying that nobody takes account of it at all, but it's not widespread. At least not yet. So, when we are processing the signal, the body processes the signal, and sometimes the mind processes the signal simultaneously. This is similar to sending signals through a series of filters, right? Imagine, and I'll show you in a minute, the drawing, similar to sending stuff through a series of filters. These filters may let the signal through unchanged, so keep those things in mind. Number one, the filters may let the signal through unchanged. Nothing changes, and the mind then can deal with it. The filter may reject the signal completely, or they may modify the signal. They change it according to certain principles that are built into the filters. Each of these actions requires biological activity that is not under conscious control. And there is, this is very annoying because my screen is hiding the top of my page. Anyway. All right, in order for the mind to do its job, the body must also do its job. Okay. Can I do something? Oh, I can put it on the bottom. Okay, that's better. Okay, so there's a complex connection between mind and body. Or to put it another way, in order for the mind to do its job, the body must also do its job. And if the body's physiological and physical response obstructs or alters the processing of the incoming signal, or to some extent, or some external force acting on the body, such as, a drug or something like that, obstructs the incoming signal or changes it, then we have a problem. And the body may obstruct or facilitate a signal because the mind has told it to do so. So how about that? So we have this really strange relationship between mind and body, where they actually interact with each other, but we're not quite sure how they do it. And also the mind may obstruct or facilitate a signal because the body has told it to do so. Right? So the body may obstruct because the mind tells it something, or the mind may obstruct. And when I say all of this, I want you to note, this really is a kind of metaphorical statement. I'm not saying that this is exactly how it happens, or that this is the truth, or that it has been demonstrated by science. But that's kind of functionally what happens. So conceptually, it works like, as I said, like a set of filters, but does not necessarily operate as shown here. So we have the green line, which is a body, which acts as a filter. A filter lets some things, it's like, if you take a piece of blotting paper or a piece of filter paper and you put dirty water through it, perhaps water with rice or something in it, and you want to stop the rice from going through. The water goes through, the rice is held by the filter paper. So the body, first of all, can accept. So the water, for example, goes through. Or the body can reject. It says, no, you're not going through. You, signal, are not going through to the next step. Or the body can take the signal, the filter can take the signal and change it somehow. So instead of the arrow on the other side of the body being white, it is now yellow. It is different. It is distorted or transformed. And then there's another level, which is the meaning-making level, which is closely connected with the mind. I've separated them here, but actually they're not separate, I don't think, but which is essentially semiotically based, which is, in other words, a set of symbolic signals, a symbolic filter, and then that goes to the mind, and the mind does something with it. So the diagram is simple, but the processes are actually very complex or unknown and depend on many factors. Habit, for example. Neurological pruning, if you don't know what that is, it's what happens when people start growing up. Instead of having lots of connections in their brain, they become more efficient because they only use certain connections. And so we get rid of them. It's called pruning. And processes also include things like selective attention, where the mind tells the body what to attend to. In other words, the body knows, and I'm not going to explain it now, but I assure you that the body, the brain, without actually processing language, knows if it's receiving a language signal or not. If it's not receiving a language signal and it expects a language signal, it will reject it. So that's something that we confirmed with some of our experiments that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Now, importantly, body, meaning-making system, and mind are all interdependent and largely coordinated by the body. I say largely coordinated by the body because everything is chemical in the end, and we have a problem if the chemistry breaks down. The body has to do what the mind tells it. The body has to enact the wishes of the mind through physiological processes. These processes can impose limitations and other conditions on language perception and production, both of which, of course, are terribly, terribly important. Language perception is hugely important. And of course, production we all know about, you know, it's what we call talking. This is because the body is not a single object, but a collection of pieces that work together in coordination with one another. But each piece has its own needs and limitations. So in terms of the innovative construct of this conference, I really want to suggest to you that what we've been doing now is in itself innovative. Because a standard TESOL class does not talk about this stuff. Okay. Now, we've known about these body-mind connections for some time, but typically they have not been used in language learning. For example, interactional synchrony, which is the synchrony between people when they meet each other and talk to each other, they synchronize their bodies in some ways. Self-synchrony, if you speak, your body synchronizes with your language. That's been known for a long time. It's even been known that some children, or not some children, children can synchronize with new languages that they are exposed to. There's gesture and posture. How do people stand? How do they walk? What do they do? It's not just cultural. There's also emblematic gestures, for example, where gesture is connected to language. There's relaxation, which is another form of activity, if you like, where we relax the body, and you have to think of systems like Suggestopedia for that. Chunk processing with psychologists like Morten Christensen, which has done some incredible work on how we process incoming language, how we comprehend, and we don't comprehend in sounds which are put together, which becomes words, which become sentences. No, we process in chunks, and because that's the only way for the brain to do it efficiently. The brain is limited. We have sensitivity to low frequencies. Did you know that our bodies are sensitive to low frequencies? And did you also know that exercise helps learning? And by the way, it could be that grammar itself is constructed on the basis of the body. For example, the length of linguistic chunks are probably not accidental, but are probably limited by the extent to which we can breathe. Right? So we have to take breaths. We can't just produce an endless stream of language. Now, from that perspective, language learning can be thought of as a whole body activity. So it's time to stop thinking that language learning is just focused on the brain, on strategies, on cognition, and so on. It isn't. It's a whole lot more. And so is every other form of learning, by the way. So as well as it is a whole body activity, as well as an intellectual activity. And the body's role, amongst others, is to deal with the physical world, both incoming signals and outgoing signals. There's one area, however, that has hardly been researched in the language learning area, and that is the physical nature of the incoming signal itself. Right? I don't mean the words or the grammar, but the actual sound waves themselves, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. We just don't do anything with that. It's always been assumed that the sound signal was not significant in the language learning process, provided that it was clear. Okay, you go into a class and you have good loudspeakers, everybody's happy. But there is one exception to this rule about people caring about the signal, and that is verbotonal theorists. If you don't know anything about verbotonal theory, you should look it up on the internet. It's quite old and quite new at the same time. Verbotonal theorists have worked with the physical nature of the signal for some time. They have used many techniques, including electronic filtering. If you don't know what that is, you'll find out in a minute. And dancing, so you can dance to the rhythm of language, right? You can walk to the rhythm of language. You connect the physical walking to the, let's call it mental language, to help teach rhythm and intonation, and as well as vowel and consonant sounds. For several decades, however, verbotonal work in the foreign languages area has diminished with no new theoretical and practical insights emerging, except for a group of researchers in the Asia-Pacific region. Here, us. Here, verbotonal theory has been revived, re-energized with new ideas and successfully applied in the teaching of pronunciation, including rhythm, intonation, and vowel sounds for both adults and children, the teaching of spoken language, and believe it or not, even the teaching of academic written English, where it has been shown, and there will be other people maybe talking about it today, that an approach based on a combination of verbotonal rhythm building plus emotional work has outperformed systems based on systemic functional linguistics and genre analysis. This was done with double-blind ratings, results from double-blind ratings when nobody knew who was who. The raters didn't know who was in the control group, who was in the experimental group, and so on. What's a pretest and what's a post? Results from double-blind ratings and other tests have been surprising and excellent, and even include increases in working memory size. Universities and people involved, and I'm going to mention them briefly, are Thailand, me, in China, Senior Normal University, Professor Dr. He Bi, Kunming University of Science and Technology, Professor Dr. Yan Yang, Kunming Medical University, Mr. Tsai Chirui, and I'm mentioning him because he's going to be one of the key people I want to talk about in the next few minutes. Da Nang Normal University with Dr. Wen Fang Wei, and Vietnam, Dr. Lu Tim IV, Australia, Charles Darwin University, Dr. Anya Lian, Indonesia, IAIN Sheikh Nurjati Cirebon, Dr. Lala Bumela Sudimantara, and at Palangkaraya, Mr. Lukman Baihaki. So all of these people, just for information, the Thai-based projects were supervised by me, and the Australia-based projects, including Indonesia, were supervised by Anya Lian. The success of these projects is characterized by a reliance on low-pass filtering of the human voice below 320 hertz, designed to do two things: make the rhythm and intonation of the language more salient, and preferentially stimulate the right hemisphere of the brain. The right brain is particularly sensitive to melodic information, and intonation is melody. Now, I just mentioned low-pass filtering and verbotonalism. Verbotonalism has many techniques for enhancing language perception, and the most intriguing one is the use of digitally filtered language to bring about perceptual change in learners and ultimately production changes. Filtering can be applied to both prosody and individual sounds. So what is low-pass filtering and what does it sound like? Filtering then is a process by which we remove certain sounds from the sound stream. And in this case, we're going to remove sounds below 320 hertz. Okay, you ready? No, you're not ready because I pressed the wrong button. Okay, I'll try again. Okay, so listen to this. Did you hear that? Everybody say, somebody say yes or no.
Yes, we can hear that. I mean, the sound.
Yes. But what do you think it is?
It's
Any
really
idea?
hard to guess.
You don't have to guess. You can say what it is. What is it? It's an intonation, right? It's the melody of this sentence.
Hello, John. When did you get back?
It's the melody of this sentence. Listen, listen. Listen again. Listen to the.
Hello, John. When did you get back?
Okay. Hello, John. When you get. This is called intonation. It's the melody of the language. You don't have to hear it, the words. You just have to hear the melody. The melody is crucial in language learning. Not all filtering is low pass, by the way. It's designed to reveal the intonation and other prosodic features of the language, however. That's what low-pass filtering does. I'm not going to talk there because I'm running out of time. Now, the joint success of these projects that we've just had, that I was talking to you about briefly, and I haven't exactly explained what they are, but I've told you they're successful, clearly indicates that focusing on the nature of the physical signal received by the student is of significant value in enhancing language learning. We've had some very interesting results with pronunciation, with normal language, with developing fluency, and improving grammar, right? And it's just too much to explain here, but let me just say it was successful. So clearly this has something to do with the way the brain processes these modified language signals. Now we knew that the two cerebral hemispheres function differently and that the low-pass signals were melodic in nature and targeted the right brain. The right brain is the right side of your head. Typically, we think of language as being on the left side of your head. We also knew that signals sent to the left ear were directed primarily to the right brain and vice versa. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Now, in all of our previous experiments, we had sent the same auditory signals to both ears without taking into account each hemisphere's characteristics. So we wondered, what if we sent to each brain hemisphere the signals that it is best or least equipped to process? So if we would send to the right hemisphere, we would send melody, and to the left hemisphere, we will send words and grammar. Would the processing load of the brain be lower or higher? And if it changes, can we enhance listening to a foreign language by using more of the brain's resources for no extra effort by the student? How about that? Right? If we can create a system where the brain does the work and the student doesn't, isn't that a good idea? So anyway, we performed a series of experiments over time using a thing called a dichotic approach. See this word, dichotic approach, where different language signals were sent simultaneously to each ear. This is a kind of, on the bottom, there's a diagram of the brain. Left ear receives a wave. Can you see? It's a filtered sentence. It hears, and in the right ear, it hears, hello, John, when did you get back? Or in this case, in the left, and hello in the right. And they hear this simultaneously. Okay, so I'm not going to take you through the settings, but basically we swapped the signals. First, left ear had filter, then right ear had filter, then both ears had filter, and then no ears had filter. What would that do to the brain? Well, we did some studies using all kinds of Thai students and Chinese students, and we've got some references for you there. I can talk to you about them later. For L2 and then L1, we had rater studies, and then now we're doing Tsai, my student Tsai, is continuing the study. He has extended previous studies. He's currently completing a major ERP and fMRI study. ERP is the scanning of electrical activity of the brain. You can do this with electrodes on the scalp. And fMRI, you've probably heard of fMRI. It's functional magnetic resonance imagery, which looks at blood flow. How does blood flow in the brain when you hear these new signals? Okay. Exciting stuff, new stuff. So far in published studies, and I keep it just to published studies because I don't want to talk about Tsai's work. I'm pleased to say that left ear filtered, right ear unfiltered produces the best result as predicted. Left ear unfiltered and right ear filtered produced the worst results in terms of load on the brain. That's significant. Left ear filtered, right ear unfiltered produced the least load, and then swapping them produced a different. The left hemisphere hated processing the melody of the language. How about that? So techniques were used varied from anonymous ratings to highly sophisticated instrumental studies, and you can see on the left some pictures from size study on fMRI. Why is this important? Well, because we can give, oh goodness me, because if these results are confirmed, we can give our students an additional way to facilitate their listening to the foreign language at no processing cost to them. It will reduce their processing load and release brain resources. This is called load reduction, and there's a big load reduction grant that we are in the process of presenting to the Australian government. All they have to do to learn better, all students have to do to learn better, is to listen to filtered language as opposed to normal unfiltered language. And it all happens automatically, or at least we think it does, because we have good evidence that it probably does. These are still early days, but one can predict the facilitation of language teaching systems, language teaching through automatic systems such as this. No work to be done, it just does it. Further research will help determine whether this will work for everyone and whether the current low-pass filter setting at 320 is best for everybody, or whether, in a precision language education perspective, different learners will require different settings. In case you do not know, precision language education is a learning or teaching approach which tailors the learning experience to the precise needs of each learner by using personal data. As experimentation continues and expands, we will collect more and more precise data to incorporate into our teaching and learning systems, enabling us, and this is important, enabling us to avoid a one-size-fits-all approach. We don't have to do page 25 of the textbook altogether and in the same time. And we will move toward the genuine alleviation of learners' real, not imagined needs, imagined by the teacher. Oh, what do you need? Well, I think you need this. For example, in the case just described, one can envisage a system also where both low pass frequency and sound intensity can be different for each learner, so as to provide the best possible processing effect for each learner. Ideally, each student would receive appropriately filtered sounds during his or her language learning. For example, in a listening class. This approach can be combined with artificial intelligence systems such as machine learning and expert systems to produce teacherless, adaptable, self-managing systems. And that will help both learners and teachers, because it takes a lot of pressure away from the learners and a lot of pressure away from the teachers. It takes the stress from the learner who has to do things that their brain can't do or doesn't want to do, and from the teachers who have to find solutions for impossible situations. It helps maximize everybody's efforts. This kind of system may well be the way of the future and provide language teaching and learning paradigm. And provide a language teaching and learning paradigm which can supplement any language teaching and learning approach selected by learners or teachers. So you don't, this work that I'm talking about isn't related to a particular philosophy of teaching or learning. It is related to how the body works. So I hope that today's very short introduction to a very complex topic, and as this introduction to the value of recognizing and focusing on the physical aspects of language input. We are not talking about Krashen's input. We are talking about a different kind of input. Right? The value of recognizing and focusing on the physical aspects of language input has been valuable and helps to lead us into a positive future for the language learning and language education enterprise. I also hope that you see and appreciate the value and significance of these discoveries. This is not another issue about how to teach grammar. Well, actually it is, because we can teach grammar better using these approaches, believe it or not. But it's not about the usual things of language, or about the usual preoccupations, the words, the grammar, the strategies. Are we going to use Michael Long? Are we going to use Chameau and O'Malley and so on? The logic behind this work is really quite simple. Give the body, the brain, the signals that it prefers, and we will improve the way we learn with no additional effort. The brain does all the work for us. And I'd like to finish on that positive note. And thank you for listening. So thank you very much. I think I actually made it more or less on time. Thank you.